Thank you for tuning into the All Funds Network podcast. My name is Mike Schroeder. I'm here with my partner, Steinke, and we just recorded an episode with Mikkel Thorup. Really fun episode, Skyler. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, and obviously very applicable to kind of our industry and financial services and kind of the audience of folks looking to, number one, create wealth, preserve wealth from a global perspective. Got into taxes, estate planning, all the aspects, second passports, citizenship, all the questions that I've been tackling, and interested in for many years. So it's definitely a fun conversation.
The second passport, that's something that's we've talked about over the years. It's something that's maybe we can move forward with it using Mikkel's service. Hopefully we can, and just like his travel experiences, it's out of this world.
Yeah, and definitely for the audience here too. I mean, one aspect, if you have a family, obviously myself, son, how do you handle that when you have families? If you're going to move overseas, what does that look like? So I think he definitely went over and we addressed some of those items too. So I think that was a great thought process as well.
Yeah, for sure. And recording is about an hour. We could have probably talked to it for 2 or 3. We got a whole notebook of questions here. We'll definitely have him back on. But I thought this was a really fun episode.
Yeah, and definitely, I highly recommend anybody who's interested in the topic of estate planning, global wealth, moving offshore, second passports, all the things, how to structure from a tax perspective. Those are different elements.
Or real estate.
That was another big one. Great point, Mike. Buying real estate in another country, how do you manage that ongoing, different aspects, definitely helpful.
Yeah. Well, awesome. Without further ado, let's jump into it.
Absolutely.
Thank you for tuning into the All Funds Network. My name is Mike Schroeder here with my co-host, Steinke, and we're joined by Mikkel Thorup. Mikkel is the founder and CEO of Expat Money. He helps high net worth individuals legally reduce their taxes, secure second residence and citizenships, and invest in global assets. He's also the number one best-selling author of the host of the Expat Money show. He spent decades in the industry, so we're gonna be talking a lot today about second passports. We're going to be talking about investing in foreign countries and some other things. But Mikkel, thanks so much, man. We're excited to have you on the podcast.
No, pleasure's all mine. I'm very honored to be on your awesome show. I love the topic. I think it's super relevant and super important in today's day and age. So very happy to be here.
Let's start with your background. How'd you come up with this?
Wow. For my background, I have to go quite far back in time. I will try to keep it as concise as possible. But what happened, gentlemen, was when I was a child, I was actually diagnosed with a learning disability. And the teacher pulled me out of class one day and sat me down in a little room. And the principal and a vice principal and like a resource teacher were there. And they said to me, Mikkel, something doesn't work quite right in your brain. And what we want to do is send you to a special school for special boys. And that's what they did. Every day for 3 years, I got on a little white bus and I took a little white bus across town and I went to this quote unquote special school. Only problem was it was actually a regular school with a special class. So you can probably imagine what happened. I got picked on, I got bullied, I got in tons of fights. Now, this is no woe is me, poor Mikkel, victim type of story. Certainly not. I mean, I got hit. I hit back twice as hard. I would never claim otherwise. All right. But after 3 years of this, I finally got to go back to my neighborhood school. And I thought, wow, my friends and everyone will have missed me. And they're going to be so excited to see me and, curious what happened and all these things. And then once again, you can kind of imagine what happened. They all started gossiping and whispering. And, oh, I remember Mikkel. He went to some retard school. Thanks, guys. Very politically correct. You know how sensitive children can be, and just So overall, it just left a really bad taste in my mouth for state-run education, for public education. And at 12 years old, I decided to stop going to school. And at 15, I officially dropped out. And not shortly after dropping out, I got to travel internationally. And when I moved overseas and I started traveling internationally, I started meeting all these incredible people who were learning things and doing things in a way that I had never seen before in Southwestern Ontario, where I grew up. And pretty quickly, I was like, "Wow, these are my people. Like, them's my peeps. Like, I'm super excited about this." And I decided to basically dedicate my life to it, dedicate my life to exploring the world and seeing what's out there. Now, fast forward to today, I've been traveling nonstop for 25 years nonstop. I've traveled to about 120 countries, just over 120 countries. I've lived in 9. I've circumnavigated the globe over 400 times. I own real estate in 10 different countries. I'm Canadian, as I said, with Danish heritage. My wife is from mainland China. I met her in Germany. We got married in Africa. Our first child was born in Brazil. Sorry, first child was born in UAE, second child in Brazil, third child in Chile, fourth child in Mexico. So my family's very, very international. I built my entire business on this, my whole hobby, my whole life, everything like that. And the funny thing is, I've been able to build up, 8-figure, 9-figure net worth here, and no one really cares that this quote unquote learning disability, which was such a horrible thing in the 1980s, dyslexia. We kind of know that dyslexia in 2025, not really a big deal. No one cares, but 1980s it was a criminal offense. So that's kind of a bit about my backstory, and I mean I covered a lot there, but we can kind of go in any direction you like. But I guess more than anything, I hope people take away from today that even after 25 years, I am so super passionate about these things, and I love my work, and I'm so fortunate and blessed and grateful to be doing this
Love
type of things and helping people through it.
Very. It's actually cool to hear that you've been everywhere, and so, and especially your kids too. That probably have a global perspective.
Very much. Yeah, well, my kids, so my eldest is 9 years old. She speaks 4 languages. She speaks English, native level, Spanish, native level, Mandarin, Chinese, native level, and then she speaks Portuguese as well. She's also studied Russian and Arabic because she was born in an Arabic speaking country. So she wanted to go back and learn that. I mean, all my kids have multiple passports. My daughter's, I mean, she's been to 32, 33 countries right now, and I'm taking her to Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan with me in 2 months, as well as Slovakia and Qatar and a few other places. So she should be at close to about 40
Wow.
countries, at 9 years old. So definitely a big difference. Like I started as a teenager. She started as,
It's incredible.
a couple of months
Really,
old, or
really
a couple of
impressive.
weeks old, let's say.
And that's, yeah, she's probably seen more of the world than a lot of people ever will. So good for her.
Well, the nice thing is that I homeschool all of my children, so we don't have to ask permission. We don't need to schedule time off. There's no like summer vacation. I speak on stage at conferences all over the place, and I like to bring my kids with me. And so we're constantly visiting different places, and I believe it gives them a really amazing perspective on the world to be able to see how other people do things. And she gets to walk lots of real estate projects with me. She sits on board meetings. She basically shadows me in a lot of the work that I do. So I'm very much a fan of entrepreneurship, of building businesses, of investing and having control over your investments and things like that. So that's really what it comes
Yeah.
down to with the education for my
Very
children.
cool. There's a lot of different directions we can take this. Maybe, okay. So your business, you really have like 3 cores. If I understand correctly, you have the second passport, international wealth, and I believe there's another one.
So most of the work that I do is definitely in a couple of different buckets, but I'm going to tie them together for you because I think it
Mhm.
will make a lot more sense. Okay. So let's say immigration, second residencies, permanent residency, citizenship, passport, etc. Okay. We can do all the legal work for you. Okay. I'm not a lawyer by trade, but I have a 30-person team. I've got in-house lawyers who work for me, etc. Okay. Well, what's going to qualify you for your immigration? It's usually some type of investment in the country. Now, that's going to be a piece of real estate or something like that. So we can help with selecting the property, making sure it's going to qualify you, that it's legal, the contracts are done, all of these types of things. So now we've got our immigration and we've got our property. Great. But how are you going to hold the property? How are you going to structure it, right? You're going to structure it in your own name. You're going to use an LLC, an IBC, an SA, a trust, a foundation. What is the wealth protection vehicle that you're going to be doing for that? All right. So we handle all of that things. And then it's like, all right, now you have a piece of investment overseas. You hold it in a foreign structure or maybe a local structure. And you have reporting requirements, right? You have reporting requirements back to your home country. You have reporting requirements and potentially taxes to the company that you have the investment. But now you also have reporting and tax filing for the country that we have the structure in, right? So we need to deal with all the tax side of things as well. So those are the four main pillars. But then if you're doing all of this stuff, you're setting up a plan B, you want to have all the things offshore, probably makes sense that you actually enjoy the country that we've chosen for this, right? So the fifth one is the lifestyle, right? So the lifestyle is the thread that ties them all together. So this is what I call the 4+1. 4+1 is the immigration, the investment, the wealth protection structuring, the taxes. The +1 is the lifestyle
Yeah.
that brings it all
Absolutely.
together. Does that make sense?
Cool. So who are your typical clients?
So good question. The bulk of my questions kind of get divided into two different buckets. Okay. First of all, we have to understand people are coming to me because they want to have a plan B. They don't like what's happening in the world. They want to move some money offshore. They, want to protect their downside. We do a lot of defense, right? Now, that person might still be residing in the United States or Canada or the UK or wherever it might be, right? But they're going to take a portion of their wealth and they're going to allocate 10%, 20%, 50%, whatever it is. We're going to move it offshore, okay? Now, that's the first half, okay? That's the first bucket. The second bucket is things are already bad. I already don't like what's happening. It's already crossed the line. They've already abused, the legal system. I'm out. So we're doing a full relocation. We're taking 100% of what they have. We're moving that, all the wealth, but we're moving them physically as well. So it's, we got to bring in, is the spouse on board with this? We have to pick the country, what kind of lifestyle, where the kid's going to go to school, shipping containers, all of these types of things. I mean, I'm not the one to do the, turn on your electricity bill or set you up with a mobile phone. I mean, I deal with the esoteric piece, right? Like the legal and the taxes and the financial side of things. But those are the kind of the 50-50. Now, for the people themselves, I would say, call it 90% of the business is Americans and Canadians, but we do have some Kiwis, some Aussies, some Brits, some French, some Germans, etc. But let's say the whole rest of the world makes up maybe 10%. The bulk is Americans and Canadians. And then for, profession wise, I would say probably about half of my people are highly paid professionals. So you can think about doctors, accountants, financial planners, wealth managers, lawyers. It's probably the biggest group I have are lawyers because they know the value of specialized knowledge, and this is not something you can go to university for. They have so many lawyer clients, and it makes sense for them. They bill at $800 an hour, $1,000 an hour. It's like these guys are super smart. They can do what I do, but it might take them, 100 hours, 500 hours, 1,000 hours of research to know and understand what it is. And if they make mistakes, that can get pretty costly too, because of all the filing requirements. Or you buy a property, you work with a fraudulent person, and suddenly, $500,000 is gone. It doesn't take much to understand the value of working with a specialist on this, And then the other half, so one half is the highly paid professionals, and the other is small business owners. Lots of brick and mortar business owners. I got 3 guys who do roofing. One does commercial, 2 do residential. I got a guy who does stairs, only stairs. I have another one who does fencing. They do $22 million a year in fencing. They got 50 employees, and they're CEO of a company, and they want to come in and move $10 million offshore, something like this, right? And so it's these highly paid professionals and these business owners. That is the bulk of the client. That's probably more of a comprehensive answer than you were looking for, but just to try to help you make sense of all of this.
That's helpful. So I guess, Mikkel, when you kind of step into that, so it's good to understand kind of the audience you're going after. But they come to you and say, hey, here's our background, here's our, finances, here's what we do for an occupation. what's this next step? You look at kind of, obviously you're asking questions, family can move, they can't move. We'll maybe dip our toe in the water. We'll start with some asset protection planning or tax planning, and then with the eventual goal of entirely moving, we'll call it offshore to another jurisdiction. What are the typical jurisdictions that you're seeing? I can vary based on the situation, of course, but what are some of the main jurisdictions in 2025 that are more advantageous than others?
I'm glad you put the 2025 qualifier in this because there are trends, okay? Different years, maybe not like, January 1st to December 31st, but, over a couple of years, you see these trends come out. Right now, most people are very comfortable with coming to Latin America. We have a lot coming to Central America, the Caribbean, things like this. Go back a decade and people were very interested in going to Europe. Europe has become a complete dumpster fire. Socialism is crazy over there. They're going for people's money. People are fleeing Europe. The productive members of society are fleeing that environment. Same thing with the UK. Nobody's going to London. They've gotten rid of their non-habitual tax residency. Last year, they had something like 14,000 millionaires who left their shores. 2025, we're expecting over 16,500 multimillionaires and high net worth people to leave the UK. So it's this exodus, diaspora of wealthy people who are leaving these places and moving to greener shores. Popular countries right now are, Panama, where I'm living. I mean, we have lots of people here. We have lots of people in Costa Rica. There are countries in the Caribbean, Cayman Islands, and stuff like this that are very popular. But there's also places like Paraguay and Uruguay and small South American countries that have very favorable tax systems, that are food, water, and energy independent, that are pro-business, right-leaning governments, and very open to foreign direct investment. For example, Paraguay, I had the opportunity to sit down twice this year with the president of Paraguay, Santiago Peña, and advise directly to the government on immigration and foreign direct investment. These countries are very, very keen to bring in skilled and wealthy people. I consult with the government of Panama. We do roughly 50% of the country of Panama's best visa here to bring in investors into the country, me and my lawyers and my partners here. So there are some really good options out there at the moment. Now, things change on a daily basis, and depending on when people are listening to this, these might be still good or they might have changed because it is a moving target.
That makes sense. And then obviously, from other elements, from your audience's perspective, obviously some folks have ancestral connections. Myself, my grandparents from Belarus. So I actually went down the rabbit hole a good number of years ago, trying to kind of go down that, path of getting connections, getting documents from Belarus and those aspects. So, but do you see some of that happening on your side as well?
Definitely. It's actually one of the first things that I'm looking at as a consultant in this space is, where are your parents from? Where are your grandparents from? Where are your great grandparents from? Because there is citizenship by ancestry. And if we can secure one of those, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to move to that country, but just having a second travel document is super valuable. And there's a couple of other ways that we can go about getting a second travel document, a second passport, citizenship. We can do the ancestry route. We can also do what's called naturalization, which is spending a certain amount of time in that country. Okay. 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, a place like Switzerland or something like that. And then you can do citizenship by investment, which I've done. For example, I'm a St. Kitts and Nevis citizen. I gave a donation to the government of St. Kitts and Nevis of somewhere around $250,000. And in turn, they made me a citizen and I got a passport for it, much faster process, than doing the naturalization. And, I wasn't born, my family's originally from Denmark and they don't do a citizenship by ancestry. So, I don't have that privilege, but, there's a couple of different ways. And then as I briefly mentioned, giving birth in another country. So all 4 of my children are born in 4 different countries. They all have different passports because we're the legal guardians of, for example, I'm the legal guardian of a Brazilian citizen. I can become a Brazilian citizen quite quickly, quite easily, just by spending about a year on ground there and then filing some paperwork. Same thing with Mexico, etc. So there are different ways of doing this. So people kind of come to me knowing that something is wrong, not knowing what to do, and want the whole full service of outlining how this works, and then we craft the plan together based on what their goals and the objectives are. Once we kind of know that, then it's like, okay, here's the second passport, here's 2 more residencies. We're going to structure everything in this trust or foundation or IBC. We have got an operating company. Here we're going to bank. Now we got to do these filing requirements back to the US. This is what you owe over here. Really 360 degree view of the thing, and then we implement
really
together.
Interesting. Can I ask one quick question? Was from your kid's perspective, was that planned in those different countries?
Yeah, of course. So I even have a small separate company that I built on the side called My Birth Abroad, mybirthabroad.com. So we fly in usually, 2-3 months before the baby is born, and we follow the legal system. We do private medical completely, so we don't use socialized. I'm very much against socialized programs, anyways. So I prefer to pay my own way, and I pay very good for a premier hospital and an English-speaking doctor. And my wife is very comfortable with the doctor. We interview them in advance. We have an Airbnb or stay at a hotel, give birth there, and then go through the process. Then the child is a citizen of that country, as well as a Canadian citizen, St. Kitts citizen, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So day one, they have multiple. But the funny was, and a quick side story, my youngest is only 4 months old. And we were super busy, super busy with business and everything that was going on. And we just put it off, flying to Mexico. And then my doctor was like, or my wife's doctor was like, okay, you can go. I'll write you this, permission letter to get on the airplane, but like, it's got to be now. We're like, okay, great. So gave us the permission letter on, I want to say Monday or something. And we flew like Wednesday or no, maybe Thursday. We basically landed, and 36 hours later, the baby was there. So we were only in the country for like less than 3 days or something like that. We didn't even know what was going on or where we were. And it was pretty funny because all the nurses are always so excited, and they see this little half Caucasian, half Chinese baby, being born in Mexico. And they're like, they don't understand. They're like, what are you doing here? And we're like, we try to explain, but they're always very flattered and, so happy that we chose their countries.
Yeah, really cool. On that note, you have a kid in Mexico, you have a kid is born in Brazil. Does let's say hypothetically the child was born in Brazil first, the second child was born in Mexico. Do they both get Brazilian and Mexican passports too?
So very astute question. Okay, so what happens is there is actually a fast track for the children to be able to pick up the nationality of their sibling. It still goes under the family reunification visa, but it's actually easier for the children to get often than it is for the parents. So it is a huge advantage, not just for the kid that is born there, not just for the parents, but for the entire family. And then think if my third child picks up my second child's passport when my third child is an adult and has children of their own, those children are going to automatically have the Brazilian plus the St. Kitts plus the Canadian plus the, in this example, the Chilean one where he was born, So it really is a gift that you can give your kids, your grandkids, the siblings, everything.
Yeah. Okay. There's I was thinking just in terms of second passport, talk to us about the, Skyler and I, for example, we're both U.S. citizens. I've considered, as Skyler has, getting a second passport, just kind of shit hits the fan passport. Talk to us about the benefits of having that second passport.
So there are a lot of benefits, and I'm not going to tell you the way that you should look at this or something. I'll list a couple of them, and they might be applicable and they might not be applicable. So the first one that most people are looking at is visa-free travel. So being able to legally enter a country without having to apply for a visa in advance. Now, you might say to yourself, but I have an American passport or I have a Canadian passport. And, what do I need? Because these are such strong passports. Well, yes, they are strong passports, but in reality, they're actually losing power. They're getting weaker year after year. And for example, I went to Brazil a couple of weeks ago, I took a group of around 20 of my investors down to Brazil with me, and they all had to apply for a visa in advance because the United States and Canada makes Brazilian gets a visa, so vice versa. Brazil makes us get a visa. But I went through my little collection and I saw that St. Kitts and Nevis does not require a visa. And actually, a quick side note, I fly business class. So I was the first person off the aircraft. I was the first person at immigration. And I handed him my St. Kitts and Nevis passport. This was just like 3 weeks ago or something. Handed him my St. Kitts and Nevis passport. He looks at it and he goes, "This is a real country?" And I was like, "Yeah, bro, this is a real country." He goes on the internet and he starts looking it up. And he's like, "This your country?" And I was like, no, man, that's not my country. Search, 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 search. This your country? I'm like, yeah, that's the one. That's the one. So he pulls up Wikipedia. He's got St. Kitts and Nevis on there, looking at the national anthem and the flag and all these things. And then eventually he's just like shaking his head and he's just like stamping the thing and just like, he's like, doesn't make any sense. But got into Brazil and, everyone else was standing in line for an extra hour and had to pay $100 and had to apply, or $90, had to apply for the visa in advance and stuff. And I got a funny story out of it. So, I mean, I get to get into countries that other people don't get to go into, there's actually a lot of countries nowadays where Americans and Canadians cannot go into. So visa-free travel, number one. Number two, what happens if something happens to your original passport? A lot of people don't know if your passport gets stolen or damaged, maybe you'll get a replacement once, but you screw this up twice, you're going to get investigated 3 times. Very unlikely that they're going to give you another travel document without some serious, like you could literally be pulled in for this. All right. Or yeah. So here's another one. If you are suspected, not proven, not after deductions, but suspected of owing over $50,000 in US taxes, or are behind in alimony or anything like that, next time you fly into the country, you're going to be brought into a little room and they're going to confiscate your passport. Okay. I've seen it happen. All right. Now, obviously, as a business owner, we have deductions, we have filing requirements, we have extensions. There's many different things on this. There can be a simple slip up and they can take your passport away from you. So now you're unable to travel. Another one was a colleague of mine. His passport was in his pants pocket of his jeans and his girlfriend was not paying attention and she washed his jeans, destroyed the passport. And that was in the middle of COVID. And Canada was about 6 months to get a new passport. So he couldn't travel. He couldn't do anything. And, if he had a second passport, a lot of that would have been solved. What about if you do have to get a visa for a country? Sometimes you send away for a visa. You have to mail your passport. Can take 2-3 weeks. Now you can't travel. You can't do anything for 2-3 weeks. You have a second travel document. You can send one away, use one to travel. I'm out of the country every couple of weeks. I'm an expat living full time in Panama, but I'm out of the country every couple of weeks. I couldn't have only one passport. I literally couldn't. If it gets stolen, all of these types of things. So it's just like reason after reason after reason after reason. And I could probably sit here and list 20 more valid scenarios of the importance of having a second travel document.
What about U.S. citizens who have dual citizenship? Is there any nuances around that?
Americans, Canadians, most Western Europeans, we're all allowed to have dual nationality. Now, dual in this case really means more than one. So it doesn't really matter 2 countries, 3 countries, 5 countries. As long as you're following the laws of each one of these countries, there's no problem with it. I'll give you an example. So I've helped clients of mine get their Singaporean passport. Okay. I used to live in Singapore, back in 2009, something like that. I lived in Singapore. I've helped people get their Singaporean passports. Singapore is very, very strict on not allowing dual nationality. So you really have to give up the passport. So we did that. We had an American client who'd lived in Singapore, and we were able to schedule with them to renounce his U.S. citizenship and pick up his Singaporean one. But if you're trying to get a St. Kitts and Nevis or a Costa Rican or a Brazilian or Chilean, there's no problem with these types of countries. So we're very careful about those things when we're selecting the jurisdiction because there's a lot of nuances with how this works.
What are the biggest mistakes that people make when they try to do this on their own?
So a lot of people seem to think that just because you read something online, that that's going to work in the real world. And I find all these armchair, people out there, YouTubers and consultants and stuff like this. And, they write a blog article and someone wants to follow this. And in reality, the person on the other end or who's creating the content has never done any of these things. And I think, not to toot my own horn here, but I mean, I think that's definitely what makes me very, very different is that I am a giant guinea pig and I just run around the world and have been doing all these crazy things for 25 years straight, long before, these blog articles ever existed, before smartphones, before any of this kind of stuff. I was out here trying and testing and it's I mean, they say it's supposed to be flattering, like plagiarism is the most fun form of copying. I can't remember what it is, but it's like I see my content with other people's logo on it all the time. And I'm like, that is pretty brutal. And things change and you haven't updated or, the laws and that doesn't work anymore or they have no context about how it actually goes through. Like I can sit here and talk to you about, sitting down and giving interviews for naturalization in Spanish or writing essays of why I should be a citizen or going through a citizenship application by investment and making the payment or having my kids in different countries. I've actually done all of these things. This is why I like to highlight my background because there's no university degree for what I do. I am literally a high school dropout. I moved overseas as a teenager and have built up a very large portfolio of investments and done these things in the real world as an entrepreneur, as a business owner. I didn't, take, offshore 101 at some university or something like that. Like it doesn't exist. You have to do it yourself.
100%. Just to be cognizant of time, I could ask you passport questions all day. Before we move to the next topic, anything else that we didn't ask you that maybe we should have?
I think these are all really good questions. I mean, I would encourage people, if you're interested in the topic of immigration, to check out our website at expatmoney.com. We have tons of resources there. And once again, to highlight, we're the originator of a lot of these ideas, and we've gone through so many of these things. So you're going to find really, really hands-on, unique stuff there, not some generic clickbaity things or anything like that. So there's a ton. And you can sign up to our newsletter. We've got several newsletters that we do, and a very, very strong and entertained and loyal group of people. As you guys can probably tell, I'm just a little bit opinionated, so my newsletters usually have a little bit of stories in them, and I am very passionate about these
Yeah,
things. But at expatmoney.com, I think you'll be able to fill in a lot of the other
100%.
details.
Let's talk about the investment side of things. So, investing abroad. That's another big thing that you guys work on. Talk to us about that aspect. Who should be doing it? What are the reasons? Take us down the rabbit hole.
Say starting for everybody, some of the most important things that you can do are threefold. So number one is the immigration. All right. We talked about this. This is a very, very important piece of the puzzle. This is, your political insurance to secure your physical self, right? I'd say the number two piece is having some investment offshore. All right. Now I'm very much one for real estate. I really like tangible assets. I own a very solid 8-figure portfolio of international real estate, and I like it very much because it cash flows and it produces massive amounts of cash for me. Now, the way that I do it is very different. I mean, there are many different ways of doing real estate. I'm not saying, everyone else is wrong and I'm right. I'm just telling you, after many years of doing this, what I have seen. What I like to do is pre-construction. I like to do it with as little money down, with a very favorable schedule of fees. I like to pay for things much later because I'm very untrusting and I like to have as much of my money in my bank account as possible. But I like to get the good deals that you are going to come for with pre-construction. I find the sweet spot overseas has usually been around the $100,000 for a property. I only deal in titled properties, so freehold, no leasehold, no 20-year lease, no Mexican bank trust, none of this rubbish. Freehold properties that you own from now until the end of time. I like properties that have very little overhead, so not large property taxes or anything like that. And I like choosing different jurisdictions and mixing and matching. So in my portfolio, I own real estate in Panama, where I am. I have stuff in Costa Rica, in Colombia, in Brazil, in Paraguay, different places. I have short-term rentals, mid-term rentals, long-term rentals. I have city, I have mountain, I have beachfront. I have, commercial spaces, I have office spaces. I own entire floors of buildings. I've got, thousands of meters of commercial space. And it all together, it builds a very nice portfolio. And then I like to structure it all very privately and securely and outside of my name. And I use different corporate blockers. And liability protection is extremely important. And then I use property management on site. So there's never a time where I'm dealing with the three T's: tenants, termites, or toilets, right? I don't want to deal with any of these things. So for me, most of my properties, they're just a line item on a spreadsheet. I don't can't remember, you tell me, hey, this apartment, is it a 2-bedroom or 3-bedroom? I have no idea. I mean, I have dozens upon dozens of properties. So these are line items, they cash flow. I'm finding that depending on the jurisdiction, you should be looking at usually around, call it 6 to 8% for long-term rentals in year one, and then probably 8 to 12% for short-term rentals. That's cash on cash. And then you're going to look at probably about 30 to 50% capital appreciation during the build cycle. Build cycles for us are about 18 months to 30 months, call it on average 2 years. And then capital appreciation annually, you're looking at probably 5 to 10% looking at the jurisdiction. So you would take that, 6 to 8% or 8 to 12%, and you would add, say, 5% or 10% to spend depending on it. So you're going to get a mid-teens type of returns on all of these things. Now, obviously, some of it is realized gains and some of it is unrealized gains, but I think it's important to look at both of them. But my daughter, I don't know if you guys have kids, but my daughter goes crazy for Pokemon. Okay. She loves Pokemon. She wants to collect every one of the Pokemon. And I'm like, this is like me. Like, I just want to collect them all, So I collect all these different real estate portfolio pieces of my portfolio. I got this Pokemon collection of real estate, and then they all just cash flow for me like crazy. And I just sit back and enjoy all of that. And it has worked very, very, very well. I wish that I had not done so much, I don't know, derivatives trading and futures and options and iron condors and all kinds of weird stuff that I tried to do in my 20s. It was just like, if I could have just collected real estate and cash flow producing assets like my daughter collects Pokemon, I'd be even better off than I am today.
Yeah. Okay. I appreciate you drilling that down for us. That's really cool. So real estate's your big thing. So when you go to these countries, is it similar to the US where you can get a 30-year mortgage? And then the second part of that question is, are you paying, as a US citizen or Canadian citizen, are you paying taxes to the United States government as well?
Okay, so let's deal with this one in reverse order. If you are a US tax person, you have a legal responsibility to file and pay taxes on your worldwide income. It does not matter where you live. It does not matter how you structure things. It does not matter at all. You make $1, the IRS wants a bite of your apple. Okay. There are a couple of tax programs by the IRS that can let us legally reduce these taxes, but you still have a requirement to file. If you are a Canadian tax resident, exactly the same thing. If you are a non-Canadian tax resident, we've done your deemed disposition, we moved you offshore, you qualify, you've paid your exit tax, et cetera, then no filing requirements, no taxes owed. Most countries kind of work in the same. The notable exception is the United States, okay? 2 countries in the world that tax on worldwide income based on citizenship. One is Eritrea, which is a small African country in the northeast of Africa, known for blatant human rights violations. Horrible place. The other is the United States, okay? So I will let you make your own decision about the tax code there and what I think of that. So That's for the filing requirements. If you make money overseas, these properties generate cash, you need to file. If you sell it for capital gains, you have to pay taxes. Okay. The other part of the question was, Mike, tell me.
The mortgage.
The mortgage, wonderful. My clients do not need to get a mortgage on a $100,000 property. We're paying cash. So a normal schedule of fees would be, what I like to do is 10% at contract signing, 10% at breaking ground, and 10% at some other milestone, usually 6 months later. So the walls go up or the roof goes up or something like that. The remaining balance, 70%, would be paid about a month before they hand over the.
You're saying the whole. I was thinking just the land. This is for land and construction. 100K.
So I'll give you an example. So I bought a beachfront property, beachfront, okay, not sea view, squint in the distance, from the balcony or something. Beachfront property in the northeast of Brazil, about a half an hour drive outside of the fifth largest city, Fortaleza. City metropolitan, about 4 million people. Okay. Beautiful duplex, two bedroom, 3-bath, duplex, beachfront. I paid $97,000 for it, pre-construction. I paid $4,000 in closing costs and put in a $10,000 furniture package. It took about, I think it was like 14 months, something like that, to build it. 2 months to furnish it, get the electricity, the internet, forks in the drawer, everything like that. All right. Since holding it, I've been cash flowing at just under 1% monthly for the last 19 months or something like that. So let's just round down, call it 10% annually for just under 2 years. The property next to me just sold for what was it? 193 unfurnished. All right. In, less than 3 years. Okay. And mine's still cash flowing today and I'll hold it forever. But the true value is just under 200K. So I've basically doubled my money in capital appreciation while collecting cash flow. So it's not just the lot, that's the lot plus home for around $100,000. So to go back to my example, in this, you'd sign the contract, you'd put $10,000 down. You put that on a credit card. It's not a big deal. Most people have room for $10,000. Then probably nothing for 4 months or 5 months or something like that. They've broken ground on the project. They've cleared the land, electricity, water. They break ground. They're building it. You give them another 10,000. Okay, 10%. And then the walls go up, the roof goes on, another 10%. All right. And then at delivery, you're going to pay the remaining $70,000, 70%. Okay. By the time you actually take possession of it, it should have gone up roughly between 30 and 50%. So really, what are you doing? You're doubling your money in the build because you're only putting 30% down, right? And the 30% increase is on the total value of the property. So most guys are buying not one property, they're buying like 5 or like 20. And so, we'll just take, when we do these are all club deals. Like this isn't Remax or something like that. We go in as a community and take entire buildings, $10 million buildings, $20 million buildings, and our community will just fund the entire thing. But we get these prices and these kinds of returns because we're really powerful community. We've got a lot of people on who's looking for these things. But you can't just go and look, on the Remax listing on the secondary market and get these types of things. It just doesn't. That's just not how it works, right?
Are you guys are price appreciation on real estate? Obviously, the U.S. has been pretty crazy over the last couple of years. Are you guys seeing the same thing internationally?
Not all countries, but certainly in the countries that are pro-business, that are welcoming foreign direct investment, we're seeing huge appreciation. We really try to follow path of progress. So because we're very well connected and we know a lot of the government officials and things like that, we kind of know what's going to happen. I also have the advantage of spending time in many different countries. So I've seen trends, For example, I'll give you one trend. So I started going to Paraguay a while ago, and there were So I don't know if you guys know Paraguay, but basically Ascension is the capital. There's a big river that runs in the front of it. Then there was Argentina. And everybody thinks or thought that on the other side of the water was directly Argentina. They didn't realize there was this strip of land that was actually owned by Paraguay. Now, there was a bridge that connected the two, but you had to drive like an hour and 20 minutes out of the way to come all the way. Now, we decided to buy up all the land on the other side of the rumor of putting in a bridge right from downtown. And that's exactly what they did. The government spent $300 million and they crossed the river. Now, North America, they crossed the river, 200 years ago, 400 years ago. Europe, they crossed the river 1,000 years ago. But Capital City, they crossed the river in 2024. So, I bought 5 hectares of premium land at $18 a square meter, and price per square meter in downtown Ascension, which is now a 7-minute drive instead of an hour and 20-minute drive. It is a 7-minute drive on average, is between $400 and $500 US dollars per square meter. I bought mine for $18. Okay. All I need is it to come up by half to be able to make this make sense. So we're going to see, capital of appreciation of, 500% or 1,000% over the next 5 to 10 years as development goes in there. So that is, path of progress done correctly, because we have foresight and vision on these things, which you just, you don't have a competitive advantage most of the time back home. Like I said, I can sit down with the president of Paraguay and discuss ideas with him. There's no way, Trump's not taking my calls. It's like, it's totally different.
I guess anything else that the pitfalls, maybe what people don't think about. Obviously, one is, just the aspects you talked about earlier, trying to do this yourself, go on YouTube and seeing somebody and trying to follow them. Anything else that people should pay attention of, well, from a global perspective, that maybe it's not apparent?
So a lot of people will try to do everything themselves. So they'll try to, go and scout a property and understand the market and then buy on secondary. And then they need to rehab it. And then they need to get a plumber and an electrician and a bricklayer. And, there's holes in the roof and they need to do all this. They want to do a fix and flip because they did a fix and flip down the street. And, they knew how to do it with their grandma's house. And now they're going to do it in Medellin, Colombia. And you're like, no, this is totally different. They don't understand the legal system, right? Most of these countries are civil law countries. They're not common law countries. So it's very, very different how these legal systems work, right? So, what are your rights as a foreigner? What are your obligations? I've done properties overseas. I have a home in Turkey that we've rehabbed, and it's been an enormous amount of work. And I have, basically a lifelong background in real estate. And this was not for the faint of heart. So I think that, it's better to work with a group of professionals who do this for a living, who really understand these things and have a team in place, and then let people make their margins. Like, everybody is in this to make a bit of money. The builder needs to make a bit of money. The developer needs to make a bit of money. The lawyers need to make a bit of money. Let people make their margin. Otherwise, if you try to tighten the screws on them too much and get too good of a deal, then they're unmotivated to do the work, and then you end up getting screwed. Be happy with a 10% instead of a 10.5% annual return on the cash flow, like, just let people make their little bit of money. I remember actually one other one. I had a client once who was here in Panama, and I recommended a partner, a lawyer to work with, and a broker to work with. And he went around and he saw all the properties and was very excited about things. But then he got the bill and it was going to be like $3,000 to close on the property or something like that. And they thought, hey, I'm sure I can do this cheaper. And those are someone I vetted, someone I've worked with, a professional. So they were sitting in a bar one night, and the person at the bar stool next to him happened to be a real estate agent. No, I'll take care of that for you. No problem. Blah, 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 blah. Have a couple of drinks. So to save, I think it was something stupid like $500 or $900 or something like that, they went with this random person. Turns out they screwed up the contract. They ended up putting it in the wrong type of structure. And then when we had to redo it, there was a 5% transfer tax. So it was a 5% transfer tax on a $300,000 property. And do the math, it was about 15,000. So he saved, $900 only to go on and spend 15,000 because the contracts were not done correctly. And it's like, God, if you have a good person to work with, just let them make their margins and just, you have your expertise. We all have our expertise. And, don't try to tighten the screws too much.
Yeah. Picking up pennies in front of the steamroller, as they say.
Exactly.
Talk to us about just like the emotional aspects about moving abroad. Give us some sense about what it's like for you, for new, people that are doing this for the first time. How does it go? Like, success stories, things like that.
Not always easy. I've seen many clients struggle with this one, definitely. Not all spouses are on the same page. One of the spouses go down the rabbit hole and doom scrolls all day and sees all this darkness, and the other one just wants to close their eyes. I've seen marriages that, I get on the call with them and, you know, one is on tears and the other one doesn't want to go. And it's just like, it's hard, I mean, if you and your spouse are on the same page, then that's amazing. I try to always reframe things that this is not a negative. This is actually a huge opportunity and a benefit. I look at it all as a big adventure and I'm having fun. I can tell you personally that the relationship with my wife is 1,000 times stronger because we've gone through really difficult times. And I know more than anything in the whole wide world that I can count on her and she can count on me. You got to have a lot of trust to follow your husband to Chile to have the baby and stuff like this. And we moved from the Middle East. We were almost a decade in Abu Dhabi and Dubai, and we moved to Panama in 2019. That took a leap of faith. And if you decide to move overseas with your spouse or with your family or your kids or something like that, it's going to be a huge adjustment. But it's also really rewarding to learn a new language, to meet people from different countries, to have perspective, to find a country that maybe suits your value system a little bit better. It's awesome. And, I'm doing my best to help people's dreams come true. I mean, I don't have to work anymore. Like I just don't. I mean, I do this stuff because it's fun and I'm excited and, and I'm only 42. I don't want to go and play golf all day or something like that. But I do find it very rewarding and I do like working with the families on these things. I don't do like large conglomerate consulting or something. I only consult with families. Awesome.
Yeah. How about the kids? You mentioned like you guys do homeschooling. Is that the case for most folks in the situation? And do the kids typically? I guess I assume they probably enjoy it. Do they enjoy it?
So there's a couple of different options on the children aspect. So I homeschool kids. Our kids. That's not for everybody. My wife is a stay-at-home mom. We've got 2 nannies in the house. I've got a full-time chef who works for us and cooks for our family. That's not for everybody, although I will say that cost of living is usually about half of what it would be back home. And then insurance is probably like 1/10 of what it would be. So you can have, platinum coverage on insurance. And then if we can legally reduce your taxes, that can be a lot of savings. So you probably could have domestic help, a driver or a nanny or a cleaning lady or a gardener. That's pretty standard down here in Latin America to have 2, 3, 4, 5 people who work in your home for you, a full estate. The kids, you can homeschool them. You can send them to private school. You can send them to international school. You can send them to Catholic school. You can send them to local school. They all have their advantages and disadvantages. I wouldn't necessarily send to a state-run school. I'm, based on my experience and my background, I'm very much against government-run education. But I think there are good options out there. And then lastly, there's online programs. I think COVID kind of showed us that there are a lot of really terrific online schools. Virtual doesn't have to be a recording, can be a live classroom as well, and have a tutor. And because what are the chances? In your district or your neighborhood, you're going to have the best teacher on planet Earth. But you can on the internet. Like, I mean, you can legit have like
Really
amazing tutors and amazing people to work with. And, I'm very freedom minded and very conservative minded. So, there's certain ideologies that I do not want my children taught. So I like to kind of know who the teachers are going to be and, what that's going to look like, what the course material is and things. So I'm not telling you what your value system should be. I'm just telling you, you get to get a more granular look at that when you move overseas and use these other types of systems.
From that perspective, that's interesting. I think obviously your kids early on were traveling at a very young age. For clients who are coming into this and saying, hey, we're already kind of established in one country or another, the kids are so old. How's that transition happen? I mean, any advice that you give kind of families that are go looking at this as they move into a new environment in another country?
I find the kids who are like 0 to 9 years old, 10 years old have no problem. I mean, they make friends with anybody. They fall right in. They learn the other languages so quickly. They pick it up like no problem. The early teens are the ones that have a little bit of trouble. Call it that 13, 14, 15, 16. I've seen some difficulty there, especially if the parent has not been transparent with the child on the reasons for, their brain doesn't quite understand. So if it's just like we're moving and that's it, like I don't think that's going to work very well. You got to kind of talk to them. All of our events are very family friendly. So like we put on annual conferences, we do quarterly trips. We've got, all the way from 0 years old up to I've got clients who are in their 80s who are on our trips and events and the whole gambit, which is also another quick side note. What I really like about homeschooling is there's no other instance in your entire life where you will only be with people who are exactly the same age as you. I like that my kids talk to people who are 5 years older, 20 years older, 2 years younger, like it's this amazing human dynamic, which is in every other aspect of life except for public education. So it's just like, you're raised by your
interesting point.
peers. You got like one teacher and 32 kids, and you're just trying to herd the poor teacher's trying to herd cats. And it's like, no, this does not make any sense.
I hear all the stories.
Oh, I bet you do. I bet you do. So, I mean, I think teaching is one of the the greatest things that you can do. Mentorship and giving. And I think you have to put so much of your heart. But I think that a lot of the system is broken. And, the way that things are incentivized and how the pay structure is done and stuff. I think it's tough. So I look at alternatives to a lot of this.
One follow-up question to that, Mikkel, is the topic of legacy from a family perspective. As you teach your kids values and still, obviously they're pricing, dad, do all types of things with their clients. How is that conversation happening?
It's an interesting one, like my kids are quite smart. Like they kind of understand that we have money, that not everybody gets to jump on a plane every month and fly business class and travel around the world. And, that we have a boat and that we have, all these privileges that other kids don't. I try to bring them in on a lot of the meetings. I try to talk them through the things, maybe not talking numbers with them, but they know that we're, wealthy family or ultra high net worth family, something. We run our wealth through a family office. So we do a lot of governance documents. So, we have a family constitution. I'm trying to teach the kids about these things, trying to impart to them that they are the stewards of wealth. Like to be totally transparent, I don't own my wealth. Okay. I don't own the stuff, right? I put everything in a single family office. That's how I run all of my money. I am the head of it. I'm G1, leading the charge, but it is as much my wife's, my mother's, my children. We run a household with 11 of us in the household that we all have a responsibility. I try to teach my daughter every time she goes for a dinner, understand this is a private client. You have to show respect. You need to be on your best behavior, ask questions. This person's a doctor. Why did you become a doctor? This person's a lawyer. Why did you want to get into these things? Try to bring them into the conversation. They see that, I'm not sitting around watching TV. I'm here from 9 o'clock in the morning until 5:30 every night on the microphone, dealing with clients. Like I have a home office, so they see every day these things. It's a work in progress, but it's good. It's super rewarding.
No, that's really cool to see. to hear kind of obviously your daughter speaks 4 languages. I felt like, way ahead of the game for me. I keep it few, but that's really, really neat to see.
As we wrap up here, Mikkel, let's end on a fun note. What are some of your favorite places that you've been? What are some of the coolest things you've done? You've had a lot of experiences that a lot of our viewers, a lot of people won't have. What are some of your favorite things that you've been through?
So I'm one of these random people who just like really likes change and differences. So I basically get really excited anything that's new. I just like going into new countries. So this last weekend, me, my wife, and my newborn, we decided to go to Guyana, which is a small South American country at the very top northeast of South America. But in reality, it's a Caribbean country in South America. It's English speaking. So we went down there. It was the presidential elections. I wanted to check out what was going on. They've got all this oil money and stuff like that. So we went over for 4 days. And like, that's really cool for me that I can just jump on an airplane and in 3 hours be in another country. And then Monday morning, I'm back in the office and back to work, right? Later this year, I'm taking a couple of my kids and my wife to Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan. I've never visited the Stan countries before. I think that's going to be cool. Last year, I took my family to Turkey, Northern Cyprus, Montenegro, Kosovo, Serbia, Slovenia, Montenegro, Bosnia. And then in the middle of it, I had to speak at a conference in Andorra, an offshore conference in Andorra. So I left my mom and my kids in Bosnia. I flew over to Spain, spent a few days in Spain, then was in Andorra, and then flew back to Bosnia. And I think we went to like 11 different countries or something. And it was me, my wife, 3 kids at the time, my mother, and my nanny. I think I'm the only person in the world to take my nanny to like Northern Cyprus or something like that, you know? And, I just think that these things are fun and to go and explore totally random countries that just nobody else goes and views. And then, you hear all this stuff in mainstream media and, Hollywood and TV and things like that. And they want to tell you how someone else is or what their culture is like, or they paint them as the villain. And it's like, you have no clue what you're talking about. Like, you've never been over there, and people just believe the horse shit that they're fed. And it's like, no, I actually want to go and see and meet people and shake their hands and ask questions. And I'm just super inquisitive and, I just think the
Awesome. Well, Mikkel, this has been a lot of fun. Really appreciate you taking the time. Learned a lot here. A lot of fun tips. Where could people go to connect with you and learn more about Expat Money?
So expatmoney.com is probably the best place to start. I highly encourage people to sign up for our newsletter. We've got a couple of different newsletters on there. You'll find them pretty easy. That would be the number one spot. Number two would be wherever you're listening to podcasts today, feel free to search Expat Money Show. That is our podcast has been going for roughly 9 years straight. We have hundreds of episodes on there exploring all of these topics in excruciatingly fine detail, going into to a lot of points about them. And then we actually have an online summit coming up October 10th to the 12th, completely free to attend. It is expatmoneysummit.com, expatmoneysummit.com. I highly suggest going into that. Previous speakers are Congressman Dr. Ron Paul, my friend and mentor, Doug Casey, certifiable billionaire, Mark Faber has been on there, plus a whole bunch of speakers you've never heard of. The lawyers I work with, the property developers, the precious metal depositories, the bankers, all of these people that actually go into making this Plan B come true. But October 10th to the 12th, I'm happy for your people to join us for free. Last year, I think we had about 8,000 attendees for the online event, and huge success. This is our 5th year doing it, so we, are pretty good at it by this point, and we get amazing reviews. So happy to take care of your people.
That's awesome. Well, that's really cool, Mikkel. This has been a fun and engaging conversation. We'll make sure to include all that in the show notes as well.